The morning sun cast long shadows across the grounds of Kensington Palace, as Prince William stood by his office window, watching the world wake up beyond the palace gates. His mind was heavy with thoughts that had been keeping him awake for weeks. The weight of his future crown seemed heavier than usual today, but it wasn't the burden of kingship that troubled him most. Catherine had been different lately, not in any way that the public would notice or even their closest staff members. She still smiled her radiant smile at public events, still engaged with children and families with genuine warmth, still carried herself with the grace that had made her beloved around the world. But William knew her better than anyone, and he could see the subtle changes that spoke of something deeper stirring within her heart. It had started 3 months ago during their visit to a children's hospital in Manchester. They had been making their rounds as they had done countless times before, bringing comfort and joy to young patients and their families. Catherine had always been natural with children, her maternal instincts shining through in every interaction. But that day something had shifted. William remembered watching her sit beside a 7-year-old girl named Emma, who had been battling leukemia for 2 years. The little girl had been shy at first, clutching a worn teddy bear and hiding behind her mother's arm. But Catherine had a gift for making children feel safe and special. She had knelt down to Emma's level, her voice soft and encouraging. "What's your teddy's name?" Catherine had asked, her eyes sparkling with genuine interest. "Mr. Buttons," Emma had whispered, slowly emerging from behind her mother. "Mr. Buttons looks very wise," Catherine had replied, reaching out to gently touch the bear's worn fur. "I bet he takes very good care of you." What happened next had touched everyone in the room. Emma had suddenly thrown her thin arms around Catherine's neck, whispering something that only the princess could hear. William had watched as his wife's expression changed, her eyes filling with tears that she fought to keep from falling. She had held the little girl for what felt like an eternity, and when they finally separated, there was something different in Catherine's face. Later, in the car ride back to London, William had asked her what Emma had whispered. Catherine had stared out the window for a long moment before answering, her voice barely above a whisper. She said she wasn't afraid anymore because angels look just like princesses, and now she knows what they look like. The silence that followed had been profound. William had reached for his wife's hand, feeling the slight tremor in her fingers. They had been married for over a decade, had faced public scrutiny, family challenges, and the constant pressure of royal duties together. But in that moment, something new had awakened between them. Since that day, William had noticed Catherine spending more time in quiet reflection. She would often be found in their private garden at Kensington Palace, sitting on the bench beneath the old oak tree where they sometimes brought their own children to play. She had started writing more frequently in the leather journal he had given her years ago, her pen moving across the pages with an urgency he had never seen before. Their children, George, Charlotte, and Louis, had noticed the change too, though they couldn't quite understand what it meant. Charlotte, ever observant like her mother, had asked why Mummy seemed to think so much lately. Catherine had smiled and explained that sometimes grown-ups need to think about how they can help make the world a better place. The palace staff had begun to whisper among themselves, not with concern but with a kind of reverent curiosity. Catherine's lady-in-waiting, Sarah, had mentioned to William that the princess had been making unusual requests. She wanted detailed reports about the children's charities they supported, asking specific questions about outcomes and real impact. She had requested meetings with child psychologists, social workers, and experts in childhood trauma. But it wasn't just professional interest driving these changes. William could see that his wife was processing something deeply personal, something that was reshaping her understanding of her role not just as a princess but as a woman, a mother, and a force for good in the world. The transformation had become most evident during their private moments together. After putting their children to bed, they would often sit together in their sitting room, the fire crackling softly in the fireplace. Catherine would share stories from her day, but now these stories carried a different weight. She spoke about the mothers she met who were struggling to care for sick children, about the fathers who worked multiple jobs to afford medical treatments, about the siblings who grew up too fast because they had to be strong for their families. "We have been given so much," she had said to him just the night before, her hand resting on his arm as they sat together on their sofa. "Not just material things, but platforms, voices, the ability to make real change. I keep thinking about Emma and all the children like her. What if we could do more than just visit? What if we could actually change things? William had felt his own heart stir at her words. He had always admired his wife's compassion, but watching her evolve into someone with such fierce determination to make a difference was both inspiring and humbling. He realized that he was witnessing something beautiful and rare, the awakening of a true calling. The next morning had brought news that would set everything in motion. Catherine's private secretary had informed them that they had received a letter from Emma's mother. The little girl's condition had taken a turn, and the family was requesting a private visit. There were no cameras required, no press coverage needed. Just the presence of the woman who had given their daughter hope. As William stood at his window that morning, he knew that this visit would be different from all the others. He could sense that Catherine was on the verge of something profound, a moment that would define not just her role as a princess, but her legacy as a human being who dared to love deeply enough to be changed by it. The phone on his desk rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was Catherine, calling from their private quarters upstairs. "William," her voice was steady but filled with emotion, "I need to tell you something important. About Emma, about us, about what I think we're meant to do." He could hear in her voice that whatever she was about to share would change everything. The morning sun seemed to grow brighter as he prepared to listen to the woman he loved reveal the depths of her awakening heart. Catherine's voice carried a tremor of excitement mixed with deep emotion as she spoke into the phone. William could picture her clearly, probably sitting in their bedroom's window seat where she often went to think, looking out over the palace gardens where their children played. "I had a dream last night," she began, her words carefully chosen. "But it wasn't just a dream, William. It was like a vision of what we could become, what we could do. I saw Emma, but not just Emma. I saw thousands of children and their families, and I saw us actually changing their lives in ways we never imagined possible." William felt his pulse quicken. He had been married to Catherine long enough to know when she was experiencing something profound. Her intuition had guided them through many important decisions over the years, from major charity partnerships to personal family choices. "Tell me everything," he said, settling into his chair and giving her his complete attention. Catherine took a deep breath. "In the dream, I was standing in a place that looked like a cross between a hospital and a home. Children were everywhere, but they weren't just patients. They were laughing, playing, learning. Their families were there too, not just visiting, but actually living nearby, being part of a community. And William, we weren't just visiting as royals making appearances. We were part of it, really part of it." She paused, and William could hear her moving around, probably pacing as she did when her mind was racing with possibilities. "When I woke up, I couldn't stop thinking about it, so I started researching, making calls to people who might know about such places. And William, there are models for this kind of thing, but nothing quite like what I saw. Nothing that combines medical care with family support, education, emotional healing, and long-term community building." William felt something stirring within his own chest. He had always been drawn to causes that helped people, but Catherine's passion was infectious. "What exactly are you thinking?" "I'm thinking we don't just visit children in hospitals anymore. I'm thinking we create a place where families don't have to choose between being with their sick child and maintaining their lives. Where children can be children even while they're fighting for their lives. Where siblings don't get forgotten. Where parents don't have to sleep in uncomfortable chairs. Where healing happens not just in the body but in the whole family." The more Catherine spoke, the more animated her voice became. William could practically see her eyes lighting up the way they did when she was truly excited about something. "I spent 3 hours on the phone with Dr. Rachel Morrison yesterday," Catherine continued. "She's the pediatric psychologist who worked with that family support program in Scotland. She told me something that hasn't left my mind. She said that when a child is seriously ill, an average of 7 family members are significantly affected. 7 people, William. Multiply that by every sick child we meet, and we're talking about helping entire communities." William was quiet for a moment, processing not just her words but the transformation he was hearing in his wife's voice. This was Catherine the way he had first fallen in love with her. Passionate, thoughtful, ready to change the world with love and determination. "There's more," she said softly. "I called Emma's mother yesterday evening just to check on how she's doing. Emma is responding well to the new treatment, which is wonderful news. But her mother, Janet, told me something that broke my heart and inspired me at the same time. William waited, knowing that whatever came next would be significant. Janet said that the hardest part isn't even Emma's illness anymore. It's watching her 12-year-old son, Marcus, try to be the man of the house while his father works extra shifts to pay for medical bills. It's seeing Emma's 6-year-old sister, Lucy, act out at school because she doesn't understand why everyone's attention is always on Emma. It's Janet herself, so exhausted from being strong for everyone that she's forgotten how to take care of herself. Catherine's voice cracked slightly. She said, "Your Highness, when you came to visit Emma, you didn't just give hope to her. You reminded our whole family that we matter, that our struggles are seen, that we're not alone." And that's when I realized, William. We've been thinking too small. William felt tears prick his own eyes. This was why he had fallen in love with Catherine, why he knew she would be an extraordinary princess and someday queen. She didn't just see problems. She saw people. She didn't just want to help. She wanted to transform. "So what do you want to do?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "I want to create something that's never existed before, a place where families like Emma's can stay together while facing the hardest challenge of their lives, where children receive world-class medical care but also have space to just be children, where parents can rest and siblings can get attention and everyone can heal together." Catherine paused, and when she spoke again, her voice was filled with determination. "I want to call it the Haven. Not a hospital, not just a charity, but a true haven where families find not just treatment but transformation." William felt his own excitement building. "How would it work?" "I've been sketching ideas all morning," Catherine said, and he could hear papers rustling. "Imagine a campus with medical facilities at the center, but surrounded by family housing that feels like a neighborhood. Children attend school right on campus, but it's designed around their medical needs. Parents have access to job training, counseling, support groups. Siblings have their own programs, their own spaces, their own recognition that they're going through something difficult too." She was speaking faster now, her vision spilling out in a rush of words. There would be gardens where families could grow things together, kitchens where they could cook meals that feel like home, spaces for art and music and play. The medical staff wouldn't just treat diseases. They would be part of a community that treats whole families. William could picture it all as she spoke. More than that, he could feel how right it was, how perfectly it matched not just Catherine's heart but their shared sense of purpose. "But here's the most important part," Catherine continued, her voice dropping to an emotional whisper. "It wouldn't just be for the wealthy or the connected. It would be for everyone. Emma's family, but also the single mother with no insurance, the refugee family whose child needs surgery, the grandparents raising a sick grandchild because the parents are gone. Everyone." William was quiet for a long moment, overwhelmed by the scope and beauty of his wife's vision. Finally he spoke. "Catherine, this is extraordinary, but something this big, this revolutionary, it would require everything. All our time, all our energy, probably years of our lives." "I know," she said simply, "and I've never wanted anything more in my entire life. William, I think this is why we were given these positions, these platforms, these voices, not just to cut ribbons and make speeches, but to actually change how the world cares for its most vulnerable families." William felt something click into place in his own heart. "Then let's do it. Let's build the haven." The silence that followed was filled with possibility, with love, and with the knowledge that their lives were about to change forever. 3 weeks after their life-changing conversation, Catherine found herself standing in a muddy field in Hertfordshire, wearing Wellington boots and a practical coat, her hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. The wind whipped across the open land, but she had never felt more energized. Beside her, William pointed to different areas of the property, his own excitement evident in his animated gestures. "The main medical facility could go there," he said, indicating a slight rise in the landscape. "Natural drainage, good access for emergency vehicles, but still integrated into the overall community feel." Catherine nodded, pulling her notebook from her coat pocket. The pages were already filled with sketches, measurements, and ideas that had been flowing from her mind for days. And the family housing could curve around this natural depression here. It would create a sense of privacy while still maintaining connection to the central facilities. Dr. Sarah Chen, the pediatric oncologist who had agreed to consult on their project, looked between the royal couple with barely contained amazement. She had worked with many charitable organizations over her 20-year career. But she had never seen anything like the passion and commitment radiating from Catherine and William. "Your Royal Highnesses," she said carefully, "I have to ask again. Are you certain you understand the magnitude of what you're proposing? This isn't just about funding a new wing of an existing hospital. You're talking about creating an entirely new model of care." Catherine turned to face her, mud spattering her boots, her cheeks flushed from the cold wind. "Dr. Chen, 3 weeks ago I visited a little girl named Emma in hospital. She told me she wasn't afraid anymore because she had seen what an angel looked like. But the truth is, she showed me what an angel looks like. It looks like a sick child who still has hope. It looks like parents who never stop loving. It looks like siblings who grow up too fast but still try to protect each other." She gestured toward the field around them. "Every child who will come here deserves to be treated like the angel they are. Not just their disease, but their whole beautiful, complicated, precious life." William watched his wife speak with a pride that threatened to overwhelm him. In the past 3 weeks, he had watched Catherine transform from someone with a beautiful vision into someone with an unshakable mission. She had spent every available hour researching, consulting, planning, and refining their concept for the Haven. "The financial projections are actually quite encouraging," William added, pulling out his own folder of documents. "Between our existing charitable foundation, the partnerships we're developing, and the government support we've been promised, we can make this work without compromising our other commitments." Dr. Chen smiled, shaking her head in wonder. "In 30 years of medicine, I've never seen anyone approach healthcare with this level of holistic thinking. You're not just treating illness. You're preventing the secondary trauma that destroys families." Catherine's phone buzzed with a text message. When she read it, her face lit up with joy. "It's from Janet, Emma's mother. Emma has been declared cancer-free. She's going home next week." The three of them stood in the muddy field, sharing a moment of pure celebration. Then Catherine's expression grew thoughtful. "Emma gets to go home healthy," she said quietly. "But what about all the other children who won't be so lucky? What about the families who don't have homes to return to because they've lost everything trying to pay for treatment? What about the children who recover physically, but carry emotional scars from months of being separated from everything familiar?" William put his arm around his wife's shoulders. "That's exactly why we're standing in this field today." Dr. Chen was taking notes as fast as she could write. "I need to be honest with you both. What you're describing doesn't exist anywhere in the world. There are excellent children's hospitals. There are family support programs. There are residential facilities. But nothing that integrates all of these elements into a true community model." "Then we'll be the first," Catherine said simply. "Someone has to be." Over the next hour, they walked every inch of the 40-acre property, Catherine's vision becoming more detailed with each step. She pointed to where the school building could be positioned to catch the morning light. She identified the perfect spot for a memorial garden, where families could remember children who had fought bravely, but hadn't won their battles. She envisioned therapy centers disguised as art studios and play areas, where children could process their experiences through creativity rather than just clinical sessions. "The most important thing," Catherine explained to Dr. Chen as they paused near a cluster of old oak trees, "is that this never feels like an institution. Children who are sick already spend too much time in places that feel cold and sterile. This needs to feel like a neighborhood, like a community, like home." William pulled out his phone and started making notes. "We'll need to hire architects who specialize in therapeutic environments. And not just medical architects, but people who understand how physical spaces can promote emotional healing." "I've already started a list," Catherine said, consulting her notebook. "There's a firm in Denmark that designed a children's cancer center that looks more like a village than a hospital. And there's a group in Canada that's pioneered family-centered residential care. I think we need to visit both places." Dr. Chen looked impressed. "You've really done your homework." "This is just the beginning," Catherine replied. "William and I have decided to spend the next 6 months visiting every innovative pediatric facility in the world. We're not going to reinvent the wheel, but we are going to create something that combines the best elements of everything that's already working." As they prepared to leave the field, Catherine's phone rang. It was their private secretary with news that would accelerate their timeline dramatically. "Ma'am," the voice said, "I have the Prime Minister's office on the other line. They've reviewed your preliminary proposal for the Haven, and they want to discuss fast-tracking the planning permissions and providing additional government support. Apparently, your project has caught the attention of the Health Secretary, and they're very interested in using it as a model for the future of pediatric care nationwide. Catherine looked at William, her eyes wide with excitement and a touch of nervousness. "Tell them we'll be there tomorrow morning," she said. As they drove back toward London, the reality of what they were undertaking began to settle over them both. This wasn't just about building a facility anymore. They were potentially changing how an entire nation thought about caring for its most vulnerable children and families. "Are you scared?" William asked as they navigated the traffic on the M25. Catherine considered the question seriously. "Terrified," she admitted, "but also more certain than I've ever been about anything in my life. Emma changed me, William. She showed me that we have the power to do more than just comfort people in their suffering. We can actually prevent some of that suffering from happening in the first place." She stared out the window at the countryside passing by, already imagining other families who would someday find hope and healing in the place they were going to build. "Besides," she added with a smile that William could hear in her voice, "someone once told me that the best things in life are the ones that scare you a little bit." William reached over and took her hand. "Then we're definitely on the right track." As Kensington Palace came into view, both of them felt the weight and wonder of the journey they were beginning. Tomorrow they would sit across from government officials and make the case for their revolutionary vision. But tonight they would hold their own children a little tighter, reminded once again of how precious and fragile and miraculous childhood really is. 6 months later, Catherine stood in the grand conference room at Buckingham Palace, facing 30 of the world's leading experts in pediatric care, family psychology, architecture, and healthcare innovation. The mahogany table was covered with architectural models, medical journals, financial projections, and photographs from their visits to groundbreaking facilities around the globe. Her hands trembled slightly as she prepared to present their final vision for the Haven, but her voice remained steady and clear. William sat at her right, their partnership evident in every shared glance and supportive nod. This presentation would determine whether their dream would become reality or remain a beautiful impossibility. "Ladies and gentlemen," Catherine began, "6 months ago, a 7-year-old girl named Emma taught me that healing isn't just about medicine. It's about hope, dignity, love, and the radical belief that every child deserves to fight their battles while still being allowed to be a child." She clicked a remote, and the wall screen displayed the architectural renderings that had consumed their lives for months. The design was breathtaking, a series of interconnected buildings that looked more like a welcoming village than a medical facility, nestled among gardens and common spaces that invited families to live, not just survive. "The Haven will serve 120 families at any given time," William continued seamlessly. "Each family will have their own private accommodation that feels like home, not a hospital room. Children will attend school in classrooms designed around their medical needs, taught by teachers who understand that a child receiving chemotherapy might need to learn differently than a healthy child." Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, the renowned pediatric psychologist they had recruited as their clinical director, stood to address the group. "What makes the Haven revolutionary isn't just the integrated approach to medical care. It's the recognition that when a child is seriously ill, the entire family ecosystem is affected. We're designing interventions that support everyone." She gestured to detailed floor plans showing sibling activity centers, parent counseling facilities, and grandparent support groups. "Research shows that 60% of marriages struggle when a child has a serious illness. 40% of siblings develop anxiety or depression. 80% of families face significant financial hardship. The Haven addresses all of these realities simultaneously." Catherine felt her confidence growing as she saw the engaged faces around the table. But perhaps most importantly, the Haven will never turn anyone away because of their ability to pay. Emma's family inspired this project, but Emma's story could be any child's story. The refugee child whose parents speak no English. The single mother working 3 jobs to afford treatment. The grandparents who thought they were done raising children but now find themselves caring for a sick grandchild. Sir James Crawford, the government's healthcare advisor, leaned forward with interest. "Your Royal Highness, the financial sustainability model is quite impressive. How did you develop the partnership structure that makes universal access possible?" William smiled, remembering the countless late nights they had spent with economists and healthcare financiers. "We realized that preventing the secondary problems caused by childhood illness actually saves money in the long term." When families don't lose their homes, when siblings don't develop mental health issues, when parents don't lose jobs, society benefits economically as well as morally. The corporate partnerships have been extraordinary, Catherine added. Technology companies are providing cutting-edge educational tools. Pharmaceutical companies are funding research initiatives. Construction companies are donating materials and labor. Everyone wants to be part of something that changes how we care for children. Professor Maria Santos from the Barcelona Children's Institute raised her hand. I've reviewed your staffing model, and I'm curious about the integration of medical and psychological services. How do you ensure that emotional healing receives equal priority to physical treatment? Catherine's eyes lit up. This was one of her favorite aspects of their plan. Every child at the Haven will have what we're calling a care constellation, a team that includes not just doctors and nurses, but also teachers, counselors, art therapists, and family advocates. No decision about a child's care is made without considering their emotional, educational, and social needs alongside their medical needs. She clicked to the next slide, showing photographs from their visit to a revolutionary facility in Sweden. We saw this approach in action in Stockholm. A 10-year-old boy with leukemia was struggling with treatment compliance until his care team realized he was afraid of falling behind his classmates academically. They developed a learning plan that let him continue studying at grade level while receiving treatment. His physical recovery accelerated dramatically once his anxiety about school was addressed. The room was silent for a moment as everyone absorbed the implications of truly integrated care. Dr. Robert Chen, a pediatric oncologist from Great Ormond Street, spoke thoughtfully. This model could transform not just how we treat childhood illness, but how we prevent the long-term trauma associated with it. The research possibilities alone are staggering. That's exactly right, William said enthusiastically. The Haven isn't just about providing better care for the children and families we serve directly. We're creating a research and training model that can be replicated anywhere in the world. Every innovation, every successful intervention, every lesson learned will be shared freely with other institutions. Catherine felt a surge of emotion as she thought about Emma and all the children like her who had inspired this moment. The ultimate goal isn't just to build one facility. It's to prove that this model works so well that it becomes the standard for pediatric care everywhere. She clicked to their timeline slide, showing construction phases, staffing milestones, and opening targets. Groundbreaking is scheduled for next spring. The first families will move in 18 months from today. But the Haven's impact will extend far beyond our walls from day one. Sir James made a note on his tablet. The government is prepared to provide the initial infrastructure funding you've requested. But I have to ask, are you both prepared for how dramatically this will change your royal duties? This level of hands-on involvement is unprecedented. Catherine and William exchanged a look filled with years of shared understanding and unwavering commitment. Sir James, Catherine said quietly, I believe our royal duties have prepared us for this moment. We've spent years visiting hospitals, meeting families, seeing problems. Now we have the opportunity to actually solve problems. I can't imagine a better use of the platform we've been given. William nodded. The monarchy's relevance in the 21st century will be determined by our ability to create meaningful change in people's lives. The Haven represents everything we want our legacy to be. As the meeting concluded and experts began gathering their materials, Catherine felt someone touch her shoulder gently. She turned to see Dr. Morrison, tears in her eyes. Your Royal Highness, in 40 years of working with sick children, I've never seen anything like what you're creating here. This isn't just going to change healthcare. It's going to change how society thinks about compassion. Catherine felt her own tears threatening. Emma changed how I think about everything. Now we get to change how the world thinks about children like Emma. As the room emptied, William and Catherine stood together looking at the architectural models that represented months of dreams. Planning and determination. Ready to build a miracle? William asked softly. Catherine smiled, thinking of Emma, now healthy and starting secondary school, and all the children who would someday call the Haven home during their own battles. I've never been more ready for anything in my life. Outside the palace windows, London bustled with its usual energy, unaware that within these walls, the future of childhood healthcare had just been transformed forever. 18 months later, Catherine walked through the completed corridors of the Haven, with tears streaming down her face, but these were tears of overwhelming joy. Sunlight poured through specially designed windows that filtered harsh fluorescent lighting into something warm and natural. Children's laughter echoed from the play areas, mixing with the gentle hum of state-of-the-art medical equipment that had been carefully integrated to feel less intimidating. "Mommy, look," 5-year-old Louis called out as he raced ahead down the corridor, pointing excitedly at the interactive wall displays that responded to touch with bursts of colorful butterflies and shooting stars. "It's like magic." William caught up to his youngest son, scooping him up with a grin. "Pretty amazing, isn't it? Your mummy designed those especially for children who might be feeling scared or sad." Charlotte and George flanked Catherine as they walked, both of them unusually quiet as they took in the reality of the place their parents had worked so tirelessly to create. At 13 and 15, they understood the significance of this day in ways that Louis couldn't quite grasp yet. "Mum," Charlotte said softly, slipping her hand into Catherine's, "it really doesn't feel like a hospital at all. It feels like a neighborhood where people happen to get better." Catherine squeezed her daughter's hand, remembering all the conversations they'd had over the past months about why this project mattered so much. "That's exactly what we hoped for, darling. Children who are sick shouldn't have to give up being children." They paused outside the first family residence, where Catherine could see through the large windows into a space that looked remarkably like a comfortable apartment. A mother was reading to 2 children curled up beside her on a sofa, while medical monitors provided quiet, unobtrusive supervision in the background. "The Hendersons arrived yesterday," Dr. Morrison explained, joining their group with her characteristic warm smile. 8-year-old Sophie is receiving treatment for a rare blood disorder. But as you can see, her 3-year-old brother Tommy gets to stay with the family throughout the process." Through another window, they could see a father helping his daughter with mathematics homework at a kitchen table, while in the background, a nurse was quietly checking medical readings on a device that looked more like a tablet than traditional hospital equipment. William felt his chest tighten with emotion. This is exactly what we envisioned. Families staying together, life continuing even in the middle of medical treatment. As they continued their tour, Catherine's phone buzzed with a text message. When she read it, her face broke into a radiant smile. "It's from Janet," she announced to the group. "Emma is here for the opening ceremony tomorrow. She wanted to be one of the first children to see the Haven completed." The family made their way to the central courtyard, where the most breathtaking feature of the Haven revealed itself. Instead of sterile hospital corridors connecting different wings, the buildings were linked by covered walkways that curved around a magnificent garden space. Children in wheelchairs could access every area, while families could move between medical appointments, educational activities, and residential spaces through paths lined with flowers, trees, and gentle water features. "Look, there's the memorial garden," George said quietly, pointing to a peaceful area where families could remember children who had fought bravely, but hadn't survived their illnesses. Even in their grief, the space offered comfort and beauty, rather than stark reminders of loss. Charlotte noticed a group of children around her own age sitting together on benches near a fountain, some bald from chemotherapy treatments, others with medical devices visible, all of them engaged in animated conversation about something on one of their phones. "They look so normal," she murmured, then immediately looked embarrassed. "I mean, they are normal," Catherine said gently. "They're children. They just happen to be children who are also dealing with serious illnesses. But they're still children who want to laugh with friends, learn interesting things, feel proud of their accomplishments." As if to illustrate her point, one of the children, a girl about Charlotte's age with a bright headscarf covering her lack of hair, suddenly burst into laughter at something her friend had shown her. The sound was pure and joyful, exactly like any group of teenagers anywhere in the world. William guided them toward the educational wing, where they found something that made Catherine's heart nearly burst with pride. In a classroom designed to accommodate children with varying levels of mobility and energy, a teacher was leading a discussion about marine biology. Half the students were attending in person, while others participated virtually from their residential units when they were too tired or unwell to leave their rooms. The adaptive learning technology ensures no child falls behind academically because of their medical treatment, Dr. Morrison explained. "We've already seen remarkable results in the pilot programs." But what struck Catherine most powerfully was overhearing a conversation between 2 children as they worked on a science project together. One boy, who appeared to be about 10 years old and was connected to a mobile IV unit, was explaining photosynthesis to a girl whose leg was in a cast. "My mom says plants are like people," the boy said seriously. "They need the right environment to grow strong, not just medicine." The girl nodded thoughtfully. "Like how we're not just sick kids, we're kids who happen to be sick." Catherine had to pause for a moment, overwhelmed by the profound wisdom of children who were learning to see themselves as whole people, despite their medical challenges. They ended their tour in the Family Support Center, where Catherine found a scene that represented everything the Haven was meant to accomplish. In one corner, a support group for parents was meeting, their faces showing the strain of their circumstances, but also relief at finding others who understood their journey. Nearby, a sibling support group was engaged in art therapy, creating paintings that expressed feelings they might not have words for yet. Most remarkably, in the center of the space, children and their families were cooking together in a large, accessible kitchen designed to feel like the heart of a home rather than an institutional facility. Cooking together helps families maintain normal routines and creates positive associations with eating, which can be challenging during medical treatment, Dr. Morrison explained. But more than that, it helps everyone remember that they're still a family, not just a medical case. As evening approached and they prepared to leave, Catherine found herself standing alone for a moment in the main corridor, watching the life flowing around her. Children moved between activities with the confidence that comes from feeling safe and valued. Parents looked tired but hopeful rather than desperate. Staff members interacted with families as partners rather than authorities. William appeared beside her, slipping his arm around her waist. "Having second thoughts?" he asked teasingly, though his eyes showed he knew better. "Just the opposite," Catherine whispered. "I'm thinking about Emma and how she told me she wasn't afraid anymore because she had seen what an angel looked like. Standing here now, watching all these children and families, I think I finally understand what she meant." She gestured toward the activity around them. Children being children despite their circumstances, families staying together through their hardest times, hope flourishing alongside healing. "Angels aren't supernatural beings who swoop down to rescue people," Catherine continued. "Angels are what we become when we choose to love each other through the worst circumstances. Every child here is an angel. Every parent, every sibling, every staff member who shows up every day to make this work." William felt tears in his own eyes as he watched his wife understand the full magnitude of what they had created together. "And you," he said softly, "you're the angel who made this possible for all of them." Catherine shook her head, smiling through her tears. "No, I'm just someone who was lucky enough to meet Emma at exactly the right moment to learn what love in action really looks like." As they gathered their children and prepared to head home to Kensington Palace, Catherine took one last look at the Haven. Tomorrow, there would be an official opening ceremony with dignitaries and media coverage, but tonight it was simply what it was meant to be. A place where children could be sick without having to stop being children, where families could face their greatest challenges without having to face them alone. The magic wasn't in the building, or the technology, or even the innovative medical care. The magic was in the simple revolutionary idea that healing happens best when people are surrounded by love, dignity, and the unwavering belief that every life has infinite worth. The morning of the Haven's official opening dawned crisp and bright, with autumn sunlight casting golden patterns through the trees that surrounded the revolutionary facility. Catherine stood at her bedroom window in Kensington Palace, watching the sunrise and thinking about the journey that had brought them to this extraordinary day. 2 years ago, she had been a princess who visited hospitals and offered comfort. Today, she was someone who had fundamentally changed how the world thought about caring for its most vulnerable children. The transformation felt both surreal and entirely natural, as if everything in her life had been leading to this moment. "Ready to make history?" William asked, appearing beside her with 2 cups of tea and the morning newspapers. Catherine smiled, accepting her tea and glancing at the headlines that proclaimed the Haven as the future of healthcare and a royal revolution in compassion. But her attention was caught by a smaller article in the corner of the front page. "Emma Morrison, age 9, to cut ribbon at Royal Healthcare Facility opening." "She's going to be there," Catherine said softly, her voice filled with wonder. "The little girl who started all of this is going to be the one to officially open the Haven." William read over her shoulder, his own eyes growing misty. It's perfect. She was your first teacher in what love in action really means. Now she gets to be the first child to officially welcome others into the place that love built. As they drove toward the haven later that morning, Catherine felt a mixture of nerves and excitement that reminded her of her wedding day. That same sense of standing on the threshold of something that would define the rest of her life. The difference was that this time, instead of promising to love one person through whatever came, she was promising to love countless children and families through their darkest times. The scene that greeted them at the haven took Catherine's breath away. Hundreds of people had gathered for the ceremony. Government officials, healthcare professionals, families who would be served by the haven, and media from around the world. But what moved her most were the children who were already living there, dressed in their finest clothes and beaming with pride at being part of something so special. Your Royal Highnesses, Dr. Morrison approached them with barely contained excitement. I need to tell you about something wonderful that happened this morning. The children who are already residents here asked if they could form a welcoming committee for the ceremony. They want to be the ones to show visitors around and explain what makes the haven special. Catherine felt her heart swell as she saw a group of children, some with visible medical devices, others showing the effects of treatment, all standing together with the confidence and joy of children who knew they were valued and loved. That's perfect, she said. They're the real experts on what this place means. As the ceremony began, Catherine found herself listening to speech after speech from officials and experts, but her attention kept drifting to Emma, who sat in the front row wearing a beautiful blue dress, her dark hair now thick and healthy, her eyes bright with excitement. When it was Catherine's turn to speak, she walked to the podium and looked out at the gathered crowd, then made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, 2 years ago, I thought I was going to make some brief remarks about the haven, and then let Emma Morrison cut the ribbon to officially open this facility. But standing here now looking at all of you, I realize that I don't want to talk about the haven. I want to talk about angels. She paused, seeing William's encouraging smile and Emma's curious expression. 2 years ago, Emma taught me that angels aren't mythical beings with wings. Angels are what we become when we choose to see each other's full humanity, especially in the midst of suffering. Every child who will live here is an angel, not because they're sick, but because they remind us what courage really looks like. Every parent who will stay here is an angel, showing us what unconditional love means. Every sibling who will grow up here is an angel, teaching us that families are strongest when they face challenges together. The crowd was completely silent, hanging on every word. But the most important thing I've learned is that we're all capable of being angels for each other. The doctors who spend extra time explaining procedures so children aren't afraid. The teachers who adapt lessons so no child falls behind. The architects who designed spaces where healing feels like home. The construction workers who built those spaces with love in every brick and beam. Catherine's voice grew stronger as she continued. The haven isn't just a building or a program or even a revolutionary approach to healthcare. It's proof that when we choose to love each other without limits, miracles become possible. She gestured toward the beautiful facility behind her. This place exists because a little girl trusted me with her deepest fears and her greatest hopes. It exists because my husband believed that love could be transformed into action. It exists because hundreds of people decided that children deserve better than just medical treatment. They deserve to remain children even while they're fighting for their lives. Catherine's eyes found Emma in the crowd. Emma, when you told me you weren't afraid anymore because you had seen what an angel looked like, you changed my life. Today you're going to open a place where thousands of children will learn the same thing you taught me, that they are surrounded by angels, that they are angels, and that miracles happen when we refuse to let fear be stronger than love. As Catherine stepped back from the podium, the applause was thunderous, but she barely heard it. She was watching Emma, who was now crying happy tears and nodding as if everything Catherine had said made perfect sense to her 9-year-old heart. The ribbon-cutting ceremony was brief but profound. Emma, with Catherine and William beside her, held the large scissors steady as cameras flashed and the crowd held its breath. Just before she cut the ribbon, Emma looked up at Catherine. "Princess Catherine," she said in her clear young voice, "thank you for listening when I told you about the angels." "Thank you for teaching me how to see them," Catherine replied. The ribbon fell away, and the haven was officially open. As guests toured the facility, Catherine found herself in conversation after conversation with people whose lives would be touched by what they had created. A mother from Scotland, whose son would be one of the first long-term residents, a pediatric surgeon from Canada, who wanted to implement similar programs, a government minister who spoke about expanding the model nationwide. But the conversation that meant the most took place late in the afternoon, as the official ceremonies were winding down. Catherine was sitting in the memorial garden when a woman approached her hesitantly. "Your Royal Highness? I'm Janet Morrison, Emma's mother." Catherine immediately stood and embraced the woman who had become so important to her life, even though they had only spoken by phone and text until this moment. "Janet, I'm so grateful to meet you in person. How are you?"
"How is your whole family?"
Janet's eyes filled with tears. "We're wonderful. Marcus is thriving in secondary school. Lucy is doing brilliantly in her art classes, and Emma—" She gestured toward where her daughter was playing with other children near the fountain. "Emma talks about you all the time, but not the way you might think." Catherine tilted her head curiously. "She doesn't talk about meeting a princess," Janet continued. "She talks about the day she met someone who really listened to her, who saw her as a whole person instead of just a sick child. She says that's when she knew she was going to be okay, not because of the medicine, but because someone believed she was worth saving." Catherine had to sit down as the full impact of Janet's words hit her. "Your Royal Highness," Janet said gently, "Emma saved your life too, didn't she? By showing you who you were meant to become." Catherine nodded, unable to speak for a moment. When she found her voice, it was barely a whisper. "She showed me that love isn't just something you feel. It's something you build. It's something you create in the world so that other people can find it when they need it most." As the sun began to set over the haven, Catherine and William gathered their children and prepared to leave. But before they got in their car, Catherine took one last walk through the facility, now bustling with its first families settling into their new temporary homes. In the main corridor, she paused at a bulletin board where children had been invited to post messages about what the haven meant to them. One drawing caught her eye, a crayon picture of children and adults holding hands in a circle, with the words "Angels Helping Angels" written in a child's careful handwriting. Below it, someone had pinned a simple note. "Thank you for showing us that being sick doesn't mean we have to stop being kids. Love, the Haven children." Catherine smiled through her tears, thinking about Emma and all the children who would find hope within these walls. The journey that had begun with one little girl's whispered confession of fear had become something that would touch thousands of lives. But more than that, it had proven something beautiful about human nature, that when we choose to see each other as angels, when we refuse to let circumstances define our capacity for love, we can create miracles that change the world one child, one family, one moment of compassion at a time.